And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Sihasin Hour. We are glad to be back on the air. We used to have a Sihasin Hour hosted every Wednesday on our group page, and more recently, in the past couple months, we're just coming to you live about once a month. But today we wanted to talk about food insecurity and how it impacts our communities and what our organization and ourselves, what we can do individually, and what we have been doing individually to impact food insecurity within our communities. Food insecurity is, it's defined by the USDA as a lack of consistent access to enough food for every person in a household to live an active, healthy lifestyle. And a lot of the factors that contribute to food insecurity are systemic. And when we look at our communities, we can see that they stem from things like infrastructure, they stem from things like poverty, employment, even housing. There's so many things that impact food insecurity. So that's the discussion that we wanted to have today. Thank you again for joining us. My name is Haólníi. I am the Public Relations Director here at Haólníi. Twitter-chini Nishlen since Ndzisgaii Bashishchin. Omaha A-Che, Cherokee A-Nulla. So that's who I am. It's been a minute. I wanted to introduce myself again. I'm going to go ahead and let our staff introduce themselves. We also have a guest with us, Darrell Yazzie Jr. Glad to have him here. But everybody we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves, and we'll start with Samantha.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Samantha Holiday. Glizasana Nishle, Bedachni Bashichin. Todachitni A Dashache, Kintachitni A Dashana, Akotargo, Dine Stanishin. I am from Ndzisgaii, Monument Valley, Utah, and I'm the director here at the community center.
Thank you, Samantha. And we'll go ahead and let Mary introduce herself.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Francis. I'm the interim executive director for Haólníi, Navajo and Hopi Families COVID-19 Relief Fund. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Mary. Darrell, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Darrell Yazzie Jr. and Shia Hadona initially Tkodachin and Eslet Hotsone Bashin Hashkandon Edash Adokinani Edashnale. They say Koda Nasha that I see Nasha de Natis Antaolia. Hello everyone, my name is Darrell Yazzie Jr. I'm from Klagito. Work with the College Land Grant Office. Title is going to be extension agent, so that's kind of what I oversee and cover topics in agriculture, growing livestock, restoration efforts and stuff like that. And food insecurity is kind of one of the topics that we oversee as well. Thank you for having me today, Kat.
Awesome. Thank you, Darrell. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Roberta.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us, everyone. My name is Roberta Roberts. And I am with the Haólníi team and the Haltsooi Community Center in Sheep Springs, New Mexico. And I'm honored to be the director there and want to say hello to everyone. And thank you for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And yeah, like I said, I gave just a little brief introduction to our topic today. But we do have, as they've introduced themselves, we do have our director here of Haólníi. We also have our directors from our community centers here, and Darrell Yazzie from the Dine College Land Grant Office. And so glad to have everybody here. And as I was leading into the topic, the Navajo and Hopi Families COVID-19 Relief Fund, which we are a part of, was able to provide, or was organized to provide, direct relief during the pandemic. And as we were able to go out into the communities during that time to provide food and PPE, we were able to see firsthand the situation that exists with food insecurity on the Navajo Nation. And as I had said, a lot of these factors are systemic. A lot of these things stem from infrastructure. Infrastructure could be roads, infrastructure could be housing, broadband, electricity, running water, or sewers, indoor sewage. There's so many ways that we need to access infrastructure and resources that a lot of our people weren't able to don't have access to. So in those ways, it really impacts how much we need in terms of accessing things like supermarkets. We talk about the Navajo Nation being such a sprawling, huge nation, and we only have 13 stores that are located on our nation to service our population. But I do know and I do see that a lot of our community members do plant fields. There's been quite a few greenhouses that come up, or hoop houses, and I see a lot of our community members practicing agriculture, practicing farming, practicing gardening, ranching as well, and raising livestock. And in these ways, I can see that they are looking ahead to plan for the future, the immediate future and the long-term future, to be able to provide for their families, to be able to provide for their communities. Now, in that, I just kind of want to back up a little bit, but and I'd like to kind of go around and ask the group, what are some of the disparities that you see in your communities that impact food insecurity? And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of go in my clockwork circle here, or clockwise circle. I'm going to ask Samantha first. What are some of the disparities that you see in your community that impact food insecurity? Sorry, Samantha, you are muted. Sorry about that.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So in my community, the biggest disparity that I see is water, access to water, and just living in an area where there is, I feel like it's a constant drought. So in not having access to water, you can't grow anything, right? There's shortage of water, and you can't grow anything. Your home, it's such a huge deal to even haul water for animals, because I can speak to that effect, because I also have a small area of garden, and I have animals and I raise animals, so it is pretty tough to get water there. And just the lack of water, I feel like is a huge disparity, because it's connected to everything else in your life. And if you have a lack of water, you're obviously going to have lacking in all other parts of that as well. And just access to food, I feel like the one grocery store we have here in Monument Valley, it's very limited. And when you're talking about limited means and foods in the grocery store that we do have here, I feel like we get whatever is left over. So like we have the nearest city that we have is in Blanding. And Blanding has a huge grocery store, and it's about, maybe 60 miles from where we live. And just the amount of food that they're able to get compared to what we get down here on the reservation. A lot of our vegetables and fruits, there is hardly any. And if we do, like, the shelf life of it doesn't last that long. Mm-hmm. And so, and then you get into like the prices of the food too, like just people who aren't able to afford those types of food because they're so expensive. I feel like that's also part of the disparity. But yeah, that's basically what I see here in Monument Valley. And yeah.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and ask Mary too. And if you guys echo the same sentiments as the previous speaker, just feel free to elaborate a little bit more on that, but because some of these things impact all of us, and we're not all in the same place. And just as I kind of go on just a little bit, access to water is something that is such a huge issue here on the Navajo Nation. How we're able to, we're having hearings and at the federal level on our rights to to the little Colorado, and how are we able to even to bank water in those situations? More recently we've had such great snowfall and precipitation in the winter, and all of that starting to melt, and it's running off and it's getting into these tributaries. But how are we as a nation able to create watersheds? That's something that I think about all the time, because as these as the water it drains into these tributaries, there are laws that are kind of restrictive as well. However, I think that that's a great point. So, Mary, let us know a little bit about some of the disparities that you see in your community that impact food insecurity.
Thank you, Mahayo. I did not introduce my clan, so let me go ahead and do that before I answer your question. Don the end shlenige ye itachi ni nishla ado tkapaha bashish chin do look at the shade ado the slane itashinale and besha ge dots bikinda e nasha, which is in the copper mine inscription house area. So to answer your question, Mahayo, on health disparities, Samantha's right on point. We do need water. Yes, that's the number one thing that we need to work with to cultivate our farms and make sure that we have foods. And but during the pandemic, we saw that there was a disruption in the supply chain. Of course, with not having access to foods immediately, like we were all used to, the instantly get the supplies that we needed. But because of the pandemic, it really disrupted the supply chain for us. So I would have to say, like, the access to healthy options. We're kind of, because we're in a rural area, we're given kind of like the last, the least popular choice maybe, or, the choices that we're given is, might not be too healthy. We're given a very limited amount types of food to choose from. And so, as you get more into closer to the cities, the major cities, there's, the whole healthy foods types of options, to the rest of the world. But because we're in a rural area, it makes it very difficult for us to have healthy options. So, and because of the lack of like refrigeration and things like that, the electricity also plays a role in that, because a lot of the homes don't have electricity. Of course, they have, families out here on the Navajo Nation have to pick food choices that can last them. The processed food, the processed meats, those are not healthy. Those have carcinogens and all kinds of different chemicals that our body are not used to. So we just need better food options. And I think the way to go is to revitalize teaching, just revitalize the teaching, what we've been taught before, but I can share that later on.
Okay.
So
great. Yeah.
My answer.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. Darrell, we're gonna go ahead and go pass the question on over to you. What are some disparities or issues or factors that you could see within your community, just in general, maybe across the nation, that impact food insecurity?
Access to resources, supplies that kind of go and coincide with growing your own. trying to find resources that are close to home. I think a lot of times we have struggles. I mean, we all struggle with the food insecurity and many factors. Like for me, I had to travel. Well, it was like an hour to the closest grocery store that has, adequate fruits and vegetables. But now, since the opening of some market stores in Ganado area, like they have that Lowe's there, and so they have like sufficient amount of vegetables and stuff like that. But a lot of it's imported. So and then with that, some of them are treated with shelf life type of chemicals. Some of them are waxed over. Some of them are, bred to be, shelf steady for a period of time. And some of those chemicals affect us in certain ways, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and all that stuff. So I think it's kind of hard to, like, even if the food is there, like, do we trust our resources is the other thing. And I think that's something that a lot of us are becoming more and more aware about, especially when it comes to, where does your food come from? Is it sustainable? Are they doing sustainable efforts and stuff like that? And so for me, I think it's more resources, I think is what we're lacking aside from, food and water. But then when it comes to water, where does our water come from? Is it not contaminated already? Is it hard water? Is it soft water? And if so, what do we need to do to build infrastructure to treat it to be safe to use? A lot of times we only have access to wells, windmills, and a lot of those are only um, they are accessed through through different aquifers. And some of those aquifers aren't really water ready. Like you can't drink it right then and there. You have to let it filter through before you can drink it or something like that. So a lot of them are labeled on the tanks, livestock water only. But a lot of that also goes back into our animal nutrition. Like are we giving our animals and then congesting from there? If we're giving them bad water, bad food, then we're going to be feeding ourselves the same thing. So it goes back into how can we have water that's accessible, yes, but more clean and safe for us to consume, not just us, but the animals that we're living outside with, like wild and domesticated. So there's a lot of nitty-gritty details when it comes to that. I think that we need to pay more attention to, especially when it comes to the chemicals that are in there right now. There's a lot of farmers out there are asking, I don't know what's in my soil, how do I go about testing those? And our office does do some support in soil testing, but we have to send that out to a lab and we have to get that processed and paid for to have that happen. So I think having those types of operations kind of closer to home would be better, because not just soil testing, but water testing, chemical testing. And then it even goes as far as like what our medicinal plants out there, or what when we forage, what are they uptaking when it comes to ground and water contaminants, and is it safe for us to consume or use, and for our ceremonies and stuff like that. So I think a lot of stuff, bringing a lot more accessible testing, I guess, equipment, laboratories near home would be really sufficient long term. Because when it comes to down to it, we need to know those details to make sure that it's safe for us, but not just for us, but for our children and for our animals and their babies and so forth. And yeah, so growing is great. But it's kind of a full-time thing again. I'm a grower myself. I also help manage a small herd of sheep. But even just those two small things kind of take up a lot of time, especially since, lambing is season here. And then there's also like different types of crops that grow. There's cool crops, warm crops, starting those. Some of them you got to start indoor and you really got to care for before you put them outdoor. Sometimes we don't have that access or more room to grow, so we have to wait for the temperature to get adequately fluctuated, because if we plant it right directly and then they start growing and the cold front comes through and then it freezes them or knocks them out of the ground, like it's hard to kind of justify that. And so I think a lot of the things is having more access to season extenders opportunities. like the hoop houses, the high tunnels, the greenhouses, is becoming a thing. But even that alone is a whole different like topic of growing. It's not the same thing as growing outdoor. It's not the same as growing indoor. And sometimes, and then a lot of that is, you have to control the temperature, the humidity and stuff like that. And so I think, yeah, so it comes down to like the nitty-gritty details, especially when it comes to the growing options and our resources. And I think those are some things that we really need to look into if we want to become more of a sovereign nation and not depend on imported food, water, supplies and so forth.
Awesome. Thanks for that perspective. I agree too. Some of the environmental impacts or factors or impacts factor into food security. And just like how you're saying, extending the growing season, some of the ways that we're accessing aquifer water that could be contaminated or polluted, or not, exactly ready to be consumed by humans is also a factor, and those things are kind of standard across the Navajo Nation. So thanks for those perspectives. Roberta, yeah, give us a little bit of insight into some of the factors that you see that impact food insecurity in your community and just in general.
Sure, thank you. Appreciate everyone's answers. It makes it a little bit more challenging for me to provide an answer, but I think one of the messages that drives this whole conversation is money. Everything we're talking about takes money. And I think that we understand that a lot of our communities are on, on the lower income side. We're rural and accessibility is minimal. And so with that said, some of the things that are challenges for our families is not only what we talked about here, but also that we have extended families that we have to provide for. So when you have that and you have a low budget, you tend to lean on non-perishable foods more so than investing in a garden. And so that is a really big barrier here on the nation. We may have water access, but it still costs money to take care of a garden, costs money to maintain your livestock. There's other factors too. There's no postal delivery. We have to all work through a post office. And yet in the rural cities, they all get home deliveries. Now imagine that on the Navajo Nation. If we could get options for home delivery, we could really expand and improve. So that is a disparity that is, I don't know if it's on any radar for a real solution. We've attempted at one point, but now we have not. So to add to the conversation, I think that is something that is a real barrier for many families, is the income. And even if it's a fair income, you also have extended family. So when that's the case, your budget is limited, you have to prioritize, and food is not at the high end. So how do we fix that? How do we address some of those things? And how do we pursue, if there's any real regulatory changes, how do we make sure it doesn't become a disparity for food insecurity for our people, like the water restrictions? There's a law on that on the Navajo Nation. There's livestock reduction. So it deters anyone from having livestock because it gets taken away. So those are the types of things I think are the underlying real factors that prevent our families from really being optimistic and strategic in their options of farming and livestock. So that's what I'll add to the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Roberta. Yeah, those are great points as well. One of the things that my wife had brought up and was telling me about was that, and she's from Loop, but there was a community member in her area who undertook almost like an Amazon type of delivery of post of mail, and so he was able to kind of like started a business, and he delivers directly to houses. And I think that that's a great point as well too, because if you look in the cities, and people can get things delivered like overnight to their addresses. You know, here on the Navajo Nation, it's so hard we do have to work through the post office. Even if we have a Google address, which kind of just gives coordinates to where we're located. If we're located rural, it's so hard for they can't even access the roads sometimes because our roads are so restrictive. But I think that
I want to say that I might have to really think about starting my Ndzisgaii, what did DoorDash?
Oh yeah.
My Ndzisgaii Chidita Lwo'i, food delivery. Because we don't
Definitely.
have any of that too. So anyway,
Yeah, and
that's
even
also a disparity.
yeah, and I think that if you look also in in the communities, I mean, they have things that are like delivery programs where you're provided like maybe even like fresh produce on a weekly basis, where people are able to get like fruits and vegetables and greens, and that would be awesome to have. It seems like we're so like it seems like we can limit ourselves here on the Navajo Nation to like farmers markets, and those are seasonal, but I think that if we looked at things in a larger perspective, by maybe extending our growing seasons through hoop houses, it'd be nice to be able to have or to be afforded fresher produce like that, and even being able to open up resources through our local supermarkets where they might be able to access or work with our farmers for some of this produce. I mean, that would be awesome. I know that we do have some, we're making small strides in terms of like having Navajo beef in our bashes, but there could be so many other ways that we could help our farmers to get their products into the stores. But anyways, those are other topics that we can explore here. I think that as we look at Haólníi and the Navajo Hopi Families COVID-19 Relief Fund, we started as an organization, like I was saying, that was providing direct relief to our community members during the pandemic. And the pandemic really, I think, exacerbated and exemplified a lot of the problems that exist here on the Navajo Nation. But one of our underlying goals and missions is to strengthen our communities, to be pandemic proof, as we say, to promote sustainability in terms of food security, food sovereignty, to address also things like language and culture preservation. And some of those things tie into the way that we farm and the way that we promote agriculture and the way that we ranch, the way that we look at the land as well. So I think just in terms of the organization, and we'll have Darrell chime in too. Darrell actually was able to undertake and provide some workshops at our TBNCC community center about gardening. However, maybe I'll go ahead and ask Mary first. What are some ways that you see our organization impacting food insecurity? And that could be through goals, missions, curriculum, through our community centers as well too. So I'll just go ahead and ask you that question, Mary.
Ways that we are working on food insecurity and strengthening, the food, the food aspect of the community center is, we're trying to educate. We want to educate the community members on finding new ways or just revitalizing, like I was saying earlier, just reintroducing methods that are, our Chase and our Masana, and what was taught to them. We want to continue that. So we're creating that space for education, just supporting families that want to learn more, really, armoring our communities with tools to create farms to do for themselves. How do you say? My grandmother used to say, you know, so we want to bring the communities back to that mentality. During the pandemic, we lost a lot of elders. We lost a lot of knowledge keepers. You know, there's children who are orphaned from, you know, from that pandemic. So, you know, it is only right that we come in as, you know, a mother or, you know, father or aunt or uncle, you know, an adult in the family would step in. So that's the way I view the community centers. So we're there to create a safe space for learning.
Awesome. Yeah, I think so as well. And I'm going to let Samantha answer the question. And just maybe as you look at the community centers, what are ways that you could see that that you're able to affect food insecurity, maybe through programming, through curriculum, through some of the workshops that you know have implemented and hope to implement?
Yeah, so some of the ways that we were able to implement food insecurity at the community center is really through curriculum. It's through creating curriculum. It's also through our programming and providing those workshops to people in our community, really teaching them the traditional practices of farming, and also creating partnerships with other nonprofit organizations in the area. You know, we have like the health clinic that's located here. We have the school district that's located here, and we also have the help of like Navajo Nation Special Diabetes. So all of these different organizations have the same goal in mind when it comes to food insecurity, when it comes to food sovereignty. So being able to collaborate with them and really bounce off ideas between one another and create that workshop that we can provide to the community, I feel is going to be beneficial to learn more about traditional practices, anything to do with farming, how to sustain ourselves with food, even promoting healthy living, a healthier lifestyle. And so I think right now, just providing that information to people, presenting that information and introducing that to them is really where we're starting from. We also like to do a lot of things that are hands-on. We have the hoop house that also needs to be revitalized and making that like a community effort, getting the youth involved and then having parents come over to help them as well. So the hoop house is, and then a garden, like gardening is also one of the goals that we've been working on, creating that community garden so that everyone can come learn to teach. And I feel like information is going to be important to share the knowledge with everyone, and everyone here is a knowledge keeper. So just being able to create that space, a central space for all organizations, for all community members to come together and really help one another, I feel is going to help with food insecurity, is going to help with food sovereignty.
Awesome. And you know, I do see that our community centers are implementing pretty it's dynamic, it's spectacular programming and curriculum, and just being able to provide the resources that our community members need to broadband, to computers, giving them a space for them to lead a class is something that I think impacts impacts food security in definitely, you know, multiple ways. I think that you know, we have so many entrepreneurs, we have so many people who are wanting to you know, to try to take a different type of a career path in their lives. Not everybody just goes to school, and not everybody, you know, is has a vocational skill, but you know, some of our people are, you know, are artists and you know, are cooks, or you know, they take it upon themselves to make a living and so the community centers, you know, as they're placed strategically throughout the Navajo Nation, it gives them those resources. It even gives them, you know, the ability to access things like education or job opportunities, to be able to go there and fill out the application online, to go to our community center and fill out your FAFSA or apply to, you know, an educational institution. I mean, those resources are there. When we look at the broadband situation across the Navajo Nation, even where I live in Window Rock, my broadband or my Wi-Fi connection is so substandard, it's slow. So our community centers do provide Starlink broadband, and I think those things are awesome as well too. So Roberta, tell us a little bit about how you see the Tooh Haltsooi Community Center looking at these issues of food insecurity, and maybe just any of the workshops or curriculum that you might want to implement that would kind of, you know, give our community members a little step up in terms of addressing these issues.
Thank you for the question. I think there's a lot of opportunities, and we are privileged to open the community center and be able to create a curriculum based on the community's needs and experience and resources. And it's exactly what Samantha shared. But in doing so, I want to say that there's a lot of knowledge, traditional knowledge that we have in the community. And then we also have the latest trends in gardening. I mean, there's people who can garden all year round and just have better, improved crops with the latest technology. And so we want to be able to introduce all of that, mix technology, the latest trends with traditional knowledge, because we're going to need all the resources here in Sheep Springs. If our listeners are not familiar with Sheep Springs, we are very vast rural today. If you look outside, it's just a huge windstorm, dust everywhere. All the topsoil is gone. It's somewhere down in the Crown Point area probably, but so it makes having a garden almost, it deters us to say, wow. So how do we do that? So we're gonna have to start from the very beginning, the onset, and show the hands-on is always the best way. And we need to start with the younger generation so that they begin to learn and have an interest to, when they get older, they hopefully develop a passion. But that doesn't say that we're not going to work with anyone, but I think key is the younger, so that they can begin to foster and enhance, and then bringing in technology, bringing in the latest trends, bringing in Masani and Che, and starting with the prayer. Here in Sheep Springs, we're very fortunate that the community has designated a healing garden. It's a decent size, where you could have a whole, several rows of traditional corn planting like we used to do, land available. They have a bigger space for trees and maybe a shade. And then they have the hoop house, and then they have planting beds. And unfortunately, last year they ran short. They weren't able to plant anything, but the year before they did. So at the community center, they said, here, food sovereignty is on your agenda. You have full access. You take the lead and you tell us. So our plans are to start from the basics and work with kids, plant some seedlings, transplant them into the hoop house, have a weekend or an evening of cleanup and teach people, let them have hands-on experience with helping us restore the hoop house and restore the planting beds and bring in the tractor and plant. We're hopeful that we would have some harvesting at the end in the fall season. But if not, that's okay. We have to start somewhere. And that resiliency, that leading by example is what we want to bring here to saying, Abin Ra, Ado, our teachings, our prayers. A lot of that we don't have anymore too. Just a real simple, free thing is faith, hope, and prayer. That was what a lot of traditional teachings had with the, the planting. And then the traditional teaching also said, like for corn, there's many ways to prepare that. It's just not for show. It's just not for the garden, but you have the corn, you have the steamed corn, you have the meal down bread, you have tadadine, you use the corn husk, all of that is used. Edo, that teaching, maybe we won't be able to show it, but we want to be able to say that. So we spark the interest, we spark the desires to say, I want to learn that. I want to learn what my Chase and Masanis did. And not just the planting part, but the stories behind it and how we were versatile to teach and use all the resources. Same with sheep and livestock. We didn't waste anything. But today, I want to share, my niece went to the store and bought lamb chops. And she wanted to fix a nice lamb chop dinner, just like with the fancy mint, sauce and everything. Boy, did she make a mistake. She got a big lecture, like, how can you waste food? Where's the rest of it? How come you shaved that part off? And she got a lecture. He's like, you wasted food. So she was like, no, I bought it from the store. I didn't waste anything. This is how it came. And so my mom was like, well, somebody wasted all this meat. That's a shame, So again, it's just an example of traditional teaching, where we are and what the latest trends are. Sometimes they don't mesh, but we have to educate. So I think it's just a fun area. Challenging, yes. But teaching is just so rewarding if at least one or two people pick it up. If one or two people absorb that and we spark passion, that is successful. So again, there's many opportunities. So I just want to, that will be my comment. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Roberta. And Darrell, I know that you work with the Dine College Land Grant Office, and I know that you undertake a lot of programs and workshops just in terms of trying to address food insecurity and through gardening and through farming and agriculture. But maybe you could elaborate on some of the ways that you see some of the programs that you're working with and working on, and how they impact food insecurity across all the communities.
Our office kind of does a lot of things sparsely, but a lot of it's all agriculture related. And so for us, we try to support a lot of farmers that are beginners, but also farmers that are doers, and farmers, that are trying to learn new methods, new ways. And so it's kind of scattered of our audience of like who we help out and how we try to help them out. And so one way I think we're trying to be more impactful is try to support our youth. And one way that we do that is offer a 2-week youth camp out in Tsaili. We spend a week in Tsaili area, Chinle, Wheatfields, and that little section there, and just try to have it environmentally based, but also try to input some tradition, some cultural implications. And we show them, this is what we do, this is how we did it, this is how we're gonna, this is why we're doing it, and a lot of things I think is really important is if you explain the why portion of it, kind of go into it in detail, people will be like, oh, okay, like now I can implement it this way and stuff like that. And so for me, I also try to implement it personally. Like I'm not just a preacher. I don't just like to talk about it. I also implement it myself. And as Roberta was saying, topsoil is, being blown away because we're getting a lot of these wind gusts. But I think our topsoil has blown away a long time ago. So I think one of the ways that I think for me, I'm personally trying to do is trying to get my family into doing kitchen composting. Composting, I think, is really big. It's not that hard once you get to learn it, but it's really fast. And so that's a really high dense, high nutrient, high mineralized soil that we can help break down and, instead of it being a waste, recycle it and then put it back into our topsoil and then help that topsoil building in a short period of time. And then trying to show our youth that, being like, try not to be so wasteful all the time. And like maybe if you don't have that big of a space to grow, container gardening is really popular too. You can recycle a lot of your plastic bottles, plastic jugs, or maybe finding a way to utilize that in the garden. Like for me, I try to save a lot of the water bottles that we've been getting for free through the food distributions. Some of them give you cases. And I'm like, instead of throwing all this bottle away, we don't really have a recycling center on the Navajo Nation, but if they do, they don't take it all the time, or they take it in a specific way. So if we want to recycle it, we had to take it to Flagstaff or Phoenix is like the near place. And those places are 2+ hours away. And I don't want to be traveling that all the time. So I'm trying to find out new ways. And so one way I tried looking at it, I went online. And then that's just another thing too. Like I love to research, love to look at ideas online. They're all out there already. Like I don't see why we're trying to create something new or create something around it. There's a lot of ideas out there online, and we just have to really research. We have to really put in our mindset of, being an academic individual, of putting those resources to use. And so with the pandemic and everything, there's a lot of stuff that have been going online. And so you just have to like type in something. YouTube's a really big one. A lot of the university extension opportunities have created like useful and informative videos of like how to grow, how to do certain things, what resources we can look for. So it just depends on us and how much we want to go into it, dive into it, and trying to like find out more information about it. So it's all at our fingertips, literally. So I think that, and then once we find it, go out there, try it. If it doesn't work, or maybe just trying to see what would work well, and then trying to learn from that trial and error. And I think that's the big thing when it comes to growing. Like you're gonna fail and fail again, and you're gonna kill a lot of plants. But through that trial and error, you're gonna kind of get more, well, depending on yourself. For me, I try to look at it as like a learning point. Like, okay, what did I do wrong, or what do I need to change? Do I need to add more water, and stuff like that. And yeah, so starting seeds and trays is something that I do. And then transplanting that into the ground sometimes doesn't, survive because they're not hard enough. And so the next year I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try it again, and then harden them off, and they do much better. And then maybe just finding out ways to harden them off a little bit better, and trying to learn the different stages of the plants of when they're strongest to transplant them is another thing. So yeah, and then for me, I try to implicate what I teach, and then through my experiences and my struggles and my failures, I try to teach that to the public of, what said topic. And then so yeah, it's a lot of trial and error, but also just trying to ask like the friends and family that I got to know throughout the growing community of like, what do you guys have that work for you, what works best. And so we kind of like share that knowledge of like, what our failures were and what we learned from it. And then maybe they said something that triggers another something that I learned, and then I tell them about it, and then vice versa. We kind of share our like experiences and stuff like that. I think that's also another thing that we need to incorporate, is trying to not just always be the teacher, but become part of the community, become part of the conversation of what does well and stuff like that. I think that's something that I really like to implement in some of my workshops. Like I don't like to just preach all the time. I like to get the audience engaged, be like, what do you guys see in this picture? Or what do you guys think this would happen if we were to do this A, B, and C? And so I try to get them thinking, because a lot of times we just kind of preach and preach and preach and give them papers, handouts, and tell them to read this, read that. And a lot of times we just collect it and it becomes a fire starter, basically. So I think a lot of times we need to be more hands-on. I think that's a really big one, but not just virtually, more in person too. But then there's people out there that want to learn, but they're busy, with work. And so having that duality of having it online, but also in person at the same time, is another thing that I'm trying to incorporate with some of the workshops that I'm doing too. And yeah, so just supporting a lot of our youth too, because they're trying to figure out what they want to do. And we're trying to show them an outlet of, what agriculture is, what biology is, how important it is. how important it can be, and how they can be helpful in the later future. And there's so many avenues when it comes to biology. I started out that way, and I never wanted to be a teacher, but basically with this work of outreach and everything, I'm basically teaching. So it's kind of hand in hand. So that's pretty great. And it got me out of my shell that, I don't want to. So now I want to, and I want to show more. But also, like I said, I don't just preach everything, I practice it. So I have a little plot. I have my livestock. I have a range area that I kind of, well, we don't have it, but like I'd like to know where different plants are, where they grow, what time of the year they start growing, the different stages of them, where different soil components are, profiles. And so I really like to, and then through those, there's like little stuff that I learn through just observation too, and looking at the wild community, how they incorporate that. So I think we need to kind of look at the broader picture of that. And then when it comes to soil health, there's soil microorganisms, there's fungus, there's a lot of these things that we have in the Navajo name for different things, and they kind of have a negative attribute about it. But there's different things, there's different funguses, there's some that are good, there's some that are bad, there's some that are useful, there's some that are not. So I think just diving into those little details is what I think is really impactful, especially for me when it comes to being a grower. So yeah. That was a long
Awesome.
answer, but I think I answered it.
Well, thanks. I mean, like some of those things, well, many of the things that you're talking about are things that we really do need to consider just in terms of how we might be able to, optimize our growth, our fields and our crops, in terms of soil, nutrients in soil, the fungus, like you were talking about. I mean, like, because every community is going to have a different kind of characteristics within their communities or their land, and those are the things that we want to be able to to optimize our fields and our growth and things like that. Also, how you were talking about starting seeds and starting plants, ahead of time, and then being able to transfer them into our fields, etc. I think those are things that are important too. As I look on social media and I see, my friends or my, my social media friends, a lot of them are doing that. A lot of them are starting seeds or have started seeds and transplanted them into their hoop houses, and are growing things like greens and even tomatoes, stuff like that. They've already started them, and I think that's good. That's really important. It's an experience or a knowledge that we need to be able to pass down to our kids or even the youth, get them interested in being able to grow crops. One of the things that I thought I was gonna just share that's a little bit of an anecdote was when I was young and I would go see my grandmother. Her name was Sylvia Manus, and she lived in Shiprock. And she was kind of a pack rat of sorts. She had things all over, always had things around. But when we would go drive in her car, especially during like harvest seasons, she would have, the back window of her car would have all these apricots that were drying in her window, and in the front dash too, and on the back seats she'd have all these fruits and vegetables that she was drying out. And we'd just be like, what's going on? Like grandma's car always has like all these things in it, but it was just the way that she was engaging in farming. We did have we had some fruit trees down on her land there. And she would, so we'd always have those too. And next thing you know, we'd have those in like cobblers or desserts. I mean, it was something that she didn't just, dry and it would, go to waste. They were things that we actually ate. And so, I think that those things are important too. I want to shout out, all of our farmers and people who are doing it. I know that we did have Tyrone Thompson from Yazzie Farms on our show before, and he was on Sihasin Hour before, and he had some previous engagements today, so he couldn't join us. But the work that he's doing too, he also, I think, sources some of his produce to the outside communities, like places in Holbrook or Winslow and Flagstaff. and they utilize some of his produce in in some of like the restaurants menus. I know that he's he participates in those farmers markets quite a bit, and is bringing some of our our traditional foods, our heirloom plants to those markets. And I know coffee pot farms as well too is another one. There's so many out there. But another example I wanted to touch on real quickly was down in San Carlos. There's a chef named Nephi Craig, and he has started a Cafe Gojo, and they use locally sourced food products and agriculture and plants, and they do things like traditional foods as well too, like acorn stew and locally sourced meats and such. But they bring it to their cafe there and feed their communities, or give them the options of these foods that were traditional to their areas. We need to have that here on the Navajo reservation. We need to have cafes like that are sourcing from our farmers here, that are cooking things that we've had. I mean, not that we don't, but we should start to look at developing those things across our nation. So we're coming to the end of the hour. I just want to give everybody a few closing words, and we'll start with Samantha. Just a reflection on what we can do, what you see that might be happening in your communities, maybe even reflecting on traditional knowledge. But we'll go ahead and give you some closing words here, our final thoughts. We'll start with Samantha.
Okay, thank you, Mahayo. Yeah, just reflecting on the discussion, I do feel like food sovereignty is something that is very important for the community. I was kind of thinking about a few things while we were listening to everyone else talk about that subject, how much I guess colonialism plays into that. Just historically, Native Americans or Navajo people have sustained their food and their food security through connection to like the land, water, and all of the living entities. And since colonialism has really changed our traditional diet of the Navajo people, and in turn has changed like our lifestyle and created a lot of like social and economical inequalities for food insecurity. And I feel that by offering these programs and offering the resources to people in our community will really help with preserving, protecting, and promoting the Navajo way of life. Having people come and share their knowledge with others in the community will really make a difference. It'll help to address these food issues, and when you address food issues, it could also lead to addressing other things as well, like health issues. Like diabetes and obesity is prevalent on the reservation, and it really does start with healthy eating to make those changes. And also like the Navajo Nation, like we're on the front line of climate change, and so like we experience severe droughts, and extraction from like other companies, larger companies, or even places that are located on the reservation. And those effects are pretty devastating, and especially for people here who rely on land for the sustenance and like the cultural viability. So I think revitalizing our Navajo teachings, going back to that systematic approach of helping one another, developing those responsibilities within families and sharing the education that we've learned, sharing the knowledge we've learned, I think would really contributes to the success in really helping with improving on the food insecurities that we have in the reservation. So yeah, and I really do appreciate all of you and all of the information that you shared with me as well. I did learn a lot from this talk. So and with that, I'm grateful to be the director here at the community center, and providing all of these resources, all of these information to the people in my community.
Awesome. Thank you, Samantha. And we're gonna go ahead and let Roberta go next. Give us any final thoughts you might have, Roberta.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to everyone who stopped by our center already and shared a lot of knowledge and experience and recommendations. If you're driving along 491, stop by Sheep Springs Haltsooi Community Center. We look forward to visiting with you. And I just want to say that continue to live to inspire, continue to be an inspiration, be a role model. Don't limit yourself. Get out and plant a tree. We all need it. And above all, just love yourself and love life. So, you know, there's not much more than we can say. We don't hear that enough every day. You're on. Okay.
Hi, Mahayo, you were just, you were on mute.
Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Darrell, go
Yeah.
ahead and give us a final thought.
Yeah, thank you again for inviting me to this. I try to inspire as much as I can, and one way that I always say to do that around you, learn something about is it edible, is it toxic, is it, can you eat it at all? What parts of it are pretty good? You know, what time does it flourish? What time does it not flourish? So I always say that I would try to learn a plant around you, because I think the more you're more aware about what's around you and what grows well or what, you know, takes over or not, then you start to kind of get in tune with the land. You know, you start to understand what's there. You're not driving by all the time. You're like, oh, like, what's that plant there, or what's that over there, or what's this plant that just keeps growing? You know, why does it grow here? Sometimes a lot of those noxious weeds, or weeds that we call weeds, are actually indicators that, you know, something is happening, something's out of balance, or something's too much in soil that it's thriving, or sometimes it's too little that some of our native plants can't overcome. So try to learn a plant every few months, you know, and try to see what that means in your region. Like I said, can you eat it? Can your livestock eat it? Because sometimes if they already go to flower, their leaves and everything will start to taste really bitter. And yeah, make have a name for use cultural implication, because all of these plants around here do have a cultural implications, whether they're native or non-native, invasive or non-invasive, noxious or not noxious. So just try to learn a plant, like this plant that you see behind me in my background, the yucca plant, and then that's also my third plant. Or is that a actually a symbiotic relationship with the moth species that it can only survive. So without this flower, that moth will survive. Without the moth, but this flower can't survive because they bloom at night, and so they're only out to conserve energy. So not only that, but also the bats that migrate through here during the summer and spring, they also kind of pollinate those flowers, but they're also edible for our livestock, and we can also eat them too. So just, you know, stuff like that, and there's different species of different things, and so learning those little applications. So that's my final words for this. When it comes to food sovereignty, food ethics, food topics, you know, try to learn something that's edible around you and try to share that knowledge. Yeah.
Thank you, Darrell. Mary, you're going to go ahead and close us out.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. I really appreciate everyone tuning in, and I just want to, the closing remarks would be just to continue learning, to continue being curious. We're always looking for instructors just like Darrell. You know, he's very passionate about, you know, what he's teaching. He lives, eats and breathes it. And as you know, he's still trying to share as much information with us as we're closing out. So we're always looking for instructors, presenters to teach the community to be there. And yeah, the best way for us to learn is through you know, the hands-on, being there in person, just experiencing, you know, how the plants feel and, you know, what it might taste like, all of that. You know, we want to be able to provide you space at our community center so that you have that learning space there. And so so if there's any presenters, any teachers that are, you know, wanting to collaborate with us, we're always here. Our doors are open. We're going to share our Facebook, our community center Facebook pages in our comments if it already hasn't been shared, so that you guys can follow the work that our community center directors and staff are doing. So yeah, so come on over and like our pages. Stop on by if you happen to be going through one of the communities that you know, we're working with, which is again Monument Valley, Utah, Sheep Springs, New Mexico, and then our third community center is going to be in Standing Rock, New Mexico. So that's all in the works. So hopefully we'll be able to open our doors later, maybe early summer. So but thank you so much. Continue being curious, and thank you for joining us.
All right. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Roberta. And thank you, Darrell. You guys all presented great perspectives today. And until we see you again, which will be next month, I'm just going to say Haólníi.
Go on it.